Hi, this is Julie Murphy with Arizona Farm Bureau, and Joel Carr is going to come in. And we're here at Extension. We're here at Extension in Yavapai County with Matt Halldorson. Did I say that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And we're continuing our wine series. Matt has a lot of insights and background and was recently on the board of the Arizona Wine Growers. But before we get into that, we want to give some props to Extension because Arizona Farm Bureau loves Extension, and Joel is going to kind of help us know more about Extension.
Yeah, so the essential role of cooperative extension in supporting Arizona agricultural and rural communities. The University of Arizona's cooperative extension has a long-standing legacy over 100 years of enhancing agricultural productivity, environmental stewardship, community health, and economic development in Arizona. Extension serves as a linchpin in connecting research with practical, on-the-ground solutions. Its programs are integral not only to the state's rural communities, but also to the overall economic and social well-being of Arizona. The funding allocated to Extension is dedicated exclusively to these efforts, reinforcing the importance of maintaining a distinct state budget line item.
So you're going to highlight some of the major areas. And this is kind of an information paper that was drafted by Arizona Farm Bureau. And we thought, well, heck, we're hanging out with Extension. So what are some of those areas, Joel?
Yeah, some of their key contributions are like 4-H and their youth development program, Project Central, agricultural entrepreneurship, mental health initiatives, nutritional security, agricultural literacy, environmental stewardship, and innovation in agriculture.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Yay. Okay, so we know a little bit more.
Yep. Yeah.
And this is your sweet spot.
Yes.
So before we get into some of my wine questions that I have for you, Matt, give us some background on you.
Yeah. So Matt Halldorson, I am the director of Yavapai County Cooperative Extension as well as an associate agent for agriculture and natural resources.
Oh, excellent.
And my specialty lies in viticulture because that's what I did for the last decade or so up in Washington State before I came back to Arizona. I consider myself an Arizonan, but I left for about 12 years to go to graduate school at Washington State University and study viticulture, and then worked in the Washington wine industry, St. Michel Wine Estates, and others. I also do a lot of consumer horticulture, so not just commercial when it comes to grape growing, but I do a lot of consumer. I master gardener education, home horticulture, things like that. I deal with people if they have bark beetles in their trees and a myriad of different things.
So you have to know the Mortimer family because of Mortimer Nursery right up
absolutely
along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. They've been great partners.
Good.
Yeah.
So the wine industry comes natural to you then if you spent so much time in Washington State, and that's going to prompt me to ask the question. You love our Arizona wine, right?
I do. Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. When I went to school at Northern Arizona University originally, and I did that I wanted to go work for the Forest Service. That was my plan, but there were no jobs available, and so I had to figure out what I was going to pivot to, and I saw that people were growing grapes and making wine in Arizona down in the Verde Valley, and I thought if I could learn how to do that, then I could find my way here in Arizona. So I left to go to Washington. I planned to spend 2 years, but 2 years turned into 12 years. And then when a position opened up back home here in Yavapai County with Cooperative Extension, I took it. And, I learned about Extension when I was up working in ag in Washington because they were such a good resource for growers. And the reason I really like them is because we're sort of neutral arbiters of information, of science-based knowledge, right? So when you
like the way you put that. That makes sense.
Yeah, well, we're not selling anyone anything.
Right.
And that's really important. When I was a grower, that was really important to me, right? Because if I needed advice, I asked a lot of different people. But sometimes there are conflicts of interest, right? You might be asking someone for advice who's also selling you a product.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But it was always good to go back and check with Cooperative Extension. Are you familiar with this product? Do I really need this, et cetera? And sometimes they say, absolutely, Matt, you need this. And sometimes they say, Matt, there's really no scientific evidence that shows that will benefit you. And I really appreciated that. And so I'd like to be able to bring that same kind of education to Arizona.
And that's what you were doing both in Washington and now here back in your home state, Arizona.
Yeah, I was a producer in Washington, and here I'm an extension agent, right? So
well, now tell us a little bit about that. I have to hear that. A producer of wine grapes.
Yeah,
okay.
Wine grapes and juice grapes, and we had a little bit of table grapes at one point. So a lot of grapes. That's kind of a little bit of cherries, but mostly I'm a one-trick pony when it comes to grapes. Yeah, I worked for, at the time, Wyckoff Farms, which was the largest grape grower in the state of Washington, right out of grad school, and then went to go work for St. Michel Wine Estates, which was the largest wine producer in the state of Washington. And Wyckoff had grown most of their grapes for St. Michel. You know, they produced millions and millions of cases of wine a year. And then my last stint was at Kiona Vineyards on Red Mountain, which is a much smaller vineyard and winery. And then I came here.
So you've worked for large growers, small growers. You were your own wine grape producer. Do I dare ask, what are the comparisons and distinctions between Washington State and Arizona when it comes to the wine industry?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's big ag up in Washington generally. Even the smallest place I worked at was bigger than maybe the biggest place here in Arizona. It's a much smaller industry. I think, California is king when it comes to the wine industry. There's something like 90% of the total wine that's made in the United States. Washington is second, but they're 5%. So they're even,
okay.
But Arizona might be 0.5%.
Wow. But that 0.5% is significant.
It's absolutely significant.
And some of the wine that we're producing here in terms of the wine grapes. And so now I'm going to get into the specifics of my questions, like regional expertise. What unique characteristics of Arizona's terroir, specifically the 3 AVAs that we have, we might get into that a little bit, but what do they contribute to the distinct flavor profiles of our wine that we produce here in Arizona?
Yeah, so we have really unique soils here, well-drained soils that are not super productive, but really well suited for wine grapes. We're very high elevation. That's something that Washington was almost sea level, so very, very low elevation. I think somewhere between 500 and 1,000 feet in elevation. Our lowest growing areas are 3,500 feet here in Arizona, going up to 4,500 feet when you're down in Sonoita. So that actually, a lot of people will compare us to Argentina because they are growing very high elevation grapes as well. And so some people are interested in Malbecs and things like that are very famous from Argentina. But you tend to see a lot more color. Anthocyanin levels in the wine tend to be much more pronounced here in Arizona than other places. And in Argentina, they would tell you that is because of the elevation.
Of the elevation. Yeah. Okay. I'll remember that. Let's talk real quickly about the 3 AVAs, distinctions. And I've got my cheat sheet notes here, everyone. I'm going to read from them. So we have 3 of them. Arizona has 3 American viticultural areas. Sonoita, that was established in 1985, which...
That's the original.
Most people don't know that. Wilcox was 2016, and the Verde Valley was 2021. So the Verde Valley is the most recent, but each thrives at high elevations, to your point you said earlier, anywhere from that 3,000 to 5,500 feet, with diverse soils, the limestone, sandstone, and volcanic in the Verde Valley, gravelly loam in Sonoita, and loamy clays in Wilcox. And so all of these 3 different regions are producing these bold, complex wines.
Yeah, absolutely. Wilcox is the powerhouse of the state. I think they grow something like 75% of the grapes in Arizona. The Verde Valley is the powerhouse, I would say, when it comes to wineries. They have the most wineries in the state. They also employ the most people in wineries in the state. Very unique places, all of them. Beautiful places, all of them. Arizona, the thing that really sets these things apart would probably be heat and precipitation, right? We tend to be bimodal in our precipitation, where we get winter and summer rains. Places like Oregon, California, Washington, they are usually winter and spring rain. So we don't have much spring rain that falls. We have a lot of summer rain, and that often dictates what we grow here in Arizona. Because we're so hot, we need varieties that tend to hold their acid really well, because acid declines very quickly with heat, and sometimes you can have flabby, unbalanced wines. So a lot of these growers are interested in Italian varietals that have really high acid. Those can be challenging with the amount of winter or summer precipitation we get with the monsoon rains.
Sure.
That tends to bring on a lot of rot. So we are working to find the best varietals for each different situation. Yeah.
I'm getting a vibe that to be a wine grape grower and then to make wines, you've got to be pretty sophisticated in figuring some of these challenges and complexities out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's because it's, the market is so specific too, right? You can't just grow what works. You have to grow what sells as well. And so people have to really understand this. Well, Cabernet Sauvignon, something that's really very popular in California and Washington. People are not that interested in buying that here in Arizona. They want something different. I think that variety would do well here, but it's not all about what does well, right? You have to have something that is marketable as well. The wines that are being produced here in Arizona do really well with the market. We're very blessed here in Arizona to have so much tourism. The Arizona Office of Tourism would tell you that our number one export in Arizona is tourism.
Yeah.
Right. And so the Arizona wine industry contributes a lot, $351 million annually to tourism, which is a big bonus.
So let's talk about that. That was for a perfect segue. The wine tourism and what the industry does for our tourism. What would you kind of highlight even more based on that point?
Yeah, well, tasting rooms, people, especially the Verde Valley, right? This is, I have lived in Arizona, or called Arizona my home, since the 90s. And I remember when there was not much going on in Cottonwood, Arizona, right? It was a place we liked to go down to the Verde River. We liked to backpack around there. We stopped to get gas. And now the wine industry has transformed Cottonwood into a destination.
I love that area. And in fact, that's what myself and my three other best friends, we hung out for the weekend in Cottonwood, and mostly to enjoy the wine industry.
Yeah.
So even though we're Arizona residents, we're drawn to this tourism factor within the wine industry.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So what about wine varietals? You kind of hinted to what we're doing here in Arizona that's completely different than what they're doing in Washington and California. But talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we're a relatively new industry. Folks like Gordon Dutt, those pioneers that were down in Sonoyta in the 70s and 80s, they began, but I think they were still saying, well, we're going to do things a lot like what California was doing. I mean, everyone's looking to, California looked to France, and we look to California. Now, as Arizona is branching out, we're sort of trying to pave our own way. What sells and what grows well here, and so. The challenge is we've got this heat, so you can't grow varieties that don't maintain their acid, or you just have really one-dimensional wines that people don't want to drink. So a lot of people are drawn to some of these Italian varietals, Gracianos, Aglianicos, Sangioveses, things like this, that really hold their acid well. The challenge can be is that a lot of these great wines, these great grapes, also have very thin skins and they tend to rot. So we haven't had much of a monsoon the last 2 years. I don't know that I love that personally, but I think wine grape growers they have a better vintage because the monsoons come pretty much right during harvest, and they can really put a hamper in your harvest. So I think that's still developing, but I think what we're looking for is loose custard varieties that hold their acid well and have thicker skins that are going to be able to survive the weather that we have here.
Okay, you said a word I want to learn more. You said loose custard?
Loose clusters.
Cluster,
right?
Okay.
So a lot of these grapes tend to rot when they start to expand and they break against each other, and then they rot on the vine, and that can destroy a whole vintage. So that's very challenging.
So what I would maybe then see then in some of these Arizona wine areas is clusters that were looser instead of tightly packed clusters. Pausing for station identification, even though we're not. We are Talk to a Farmer Friday, but it's not like we're a show on TV. So just reminding anybody that's watching us live, feel free to ask Matt some questions. We're here in Yavapai in their extension office, and Matt Halldorson is their extension specialist and an expert in wine. So if you have any comments or questions, just post in the comment section. And then also just remember, if you're catching this at the end of it, or you want to take more time to listen to it later, we do save it to the video/reels section on the Instagram app, but we also upload this to Arizona Farm Bureau's website at azfb.org. You can just look in our news and information section, and you'll find a section for our Talk to a Farmer Friday, Talk to a Rancher, Talk to Extension Agents section right there on the website. And that's an easier way to kind of watch it. I know a lot of times some of our followers like to watch a bit of it, maybe one evening, and then on the weekend watch the rest of it. So remember where you can find this, and thank you for being part of Arizona Farm Bureau's Talk to a Farmer Friday. So Matt, I have another question on viticulture challenges. What are the biggest challenges Arizona grape growers face? And in some ways, you've kind of hinted toward that in terms of climate, soil, or water management, and how are they addressing these challenges?
Yeah, well, we did talk about some of those. You know, it's warm here in Arizona, and it seems to be getting warmer every year, and so finding the right varieties that work out with that heat, that create good wine is a challenge. Water is a huge challenge for us, right? Now, luckily, the good news about wine grapes is they use a fraction of the water of most crops that we grow in Arizona, 1.3 acre feet, which is still not a small amount of water. I mean, agriculture uses water, there's no doubt, but I don't think there are many things better to put your water into than food. So, you know, I won't really directly compare other crops, but wine grapes are especially efficient with water use. And if you know what you're doing and you're using proper technique, you can even lower that water use. You know, so we're talking 1.125 acre feet, something like this. So that's good in general, even though it is challenging. Wine grapes are a great product for Arizona in general. You know, finding enough arable land, right? You need large sections of land. You know, Yavapai County is 75% public land. And the reason I think often is because it's hard to grow crops in a lot of this land, right? Right. So they made it public land. You know, places like Wilcox, places like Santa Cruz County, Sonora, you know, they have large tracts of arable land that we can use. So the expansion of the wine industry is really predicated on being able to find enough good farming land that we can use for that. You know?
Did you get into the wine industry because you like wine? I'm curious how you ended up in Washington working in the wine industry there.
Yeah, well, you know, I did like wine. I don't think I considered myself a wine aficionado. It was, you know, when we were saying earlier, when I graduated from Northern Arizona University, I wanted to go work for the Forest Service. That was my plan, but they were not hiring. And I saw that people were making wine and growing grapes in the Verde Valley, and I thought if I could learn how to do that, then I could have a job here in Yavapai County in my home. And so I applied to graduate school at Washington. It was the first place I applied and the first place that took me, and you know, I just kind of went and ended up there. And it's a fun industry to be in, though. There's a lot of interesting perks that go on.
Isn't it? I have had so much fun getting to know our farmers that are not only farming wine grapes, but then are also making it. One thing that strikes me too, and I have to ask this question, and maybe it's not fair, but do you have a favorite varietal if you drink wine?
Yeah, you know, I like Grenache a lot. That's depending on who you talk to, a French or a Spanish variety. You know, it's called Grenache in France and Garnacha in Spain. You know, it can be a lot of different things. I like a lot of those Italian varietals that I mentioned. They're really food friendly. I mean, that's kind of where my palate has gone these days. It's can I eat it with food, and can I eat it with a lot of different foods? I think Arizona is actually benefiting from changes in wine tastes, right? When I was in Washington and in the 90s and the aughts and even in the teens, people were very focused on big wines, you know, really almost cocktail wines, right? And I don't eat enough, red meat, and that's kind of what you need with every one of those wines. People didn't really want blends, and they didn't want more drinkable wines. In fact, they were getting away from European sort of style wines. That pendulum is swinging back, right? Where a new generation of wine drinkers is interested in different things, right? So they are interested in blends. They're interested in more food-friendly wines, acid-forward wines, things that you can pair with a lot of different things besides just steak or fish, right? I mean, I like things that are food-friendly, and a lot of those Arizona wines happen to be that.
And that's good, obviously. One of the things that I heard someone say sometime is that Arizona winemakers are really good with the blends. They really know how to blend. Any theories as to why?
I think they've had to be.
Okay.
I think they've had to be, and that is because, farming in Arizona is tough. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about it. The climate here is intense. It can be really cold. It can be really hot. Mm-hmm. It can be really dry. It can be really wet. And so, I always, when I talk to grape growers, we talk about hedging our bets a lot. You don't want to just grow one of the same variety, because sometimes the monsoons may come, or you may get frosted out, or it might get a million different things could happen. So sometimes I think that these blends come from what varieties happen to do well this year. And so that's sort of, and I'm sure that's how it went in Europe as well, right? And so I think that Arizona wine growers have been forced to become really great at blending because they have to be creative with what Mother Nature gives us.
So talk about industry growth. I'm so excited to ask you this question now, discovering that you worked in the wine industry in Washington State. You have that familiarity. It's bigger there, even though if you compare Washington, California, it's still small, but it's bigger. So what's your take on growth for the wine industry, and where do you see us? Where do you see us going?
Yeah, well, I think, the sky's the limit. And that's because we have such a great outlet. We don't even necessarily have to export our wines. People come here to drink Arizona wine, which means that, as a lot of wine industries were becoming oversaturated, right, and trying to export wine all over the place, and people were not buying, we have not expanded that. We haven't oversaturated ourselves. And frankly, people are coming to our state to use our product, which is actually also really great for water consumption, right? We're not taking our water, bottling it, and then sending it out of state. All our water stays, generally, there's a few producers that have larger distribution, but most of our wines stay in state. Are we ever going to be California? No, I don't think anyone else is ever going to be California when it comes to making wine. But I think we have a strong base for our industry that will continue to go because, again, we fit really well with tourism, and we fit really well with water consciousness and water savings, right? Those are great products for Arizona.
Every wine grower can say, guess what? We only use, what did you say, an acre and a quarter?
Yeah,
per
1.25 acre feet, which is, people can't believe that.
Right, and it's something to talk about because everybody looks at Arizona and they're concerned, what are you doing with all your water? Well, we're growing food, and we're growing wine grapes specifically, since this is what we're talking about. What about consumer trends?
What I see is, again, I think this is in Arizona's favor, right? Where younger generations of wine drinkers are interested in something different than their parents. And they are interested in more food-friendly wines. They're interested in lighter wines. They're interested in blends. They're interested in trying varieties they've never heard before, right? Okay. It used to be if you weren't producing something from Bordeaux or Burgundy, people weren't interested. They've never heard of this. And if it's not Merlot, if it's not Pinot Noir, not Cabernet, I don't want any of it. Now, the younger generation seems to be interested. If I have heard of it, I'm less interested. I would like to try something that I'm unfamiliar with. Yeah.
And I do think it's one of the ways to introduce people that really haven't tried wine to our Arizona wines, especially the blends, because we do it so well. Like you said, those lighter wines and maybe wines that can be paired with a number of foods, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. So to me, we have a lot of potential for growth. We have a lot of potential for drawing in new customers, but it's almost like, it also feels like that famous movie titled Build It, or I think it was a movie, Build It and They Will Come, or it was a famous line in the movie. And in some ways, the Arizona wine industry has done that. They've built it, and people are coming.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say, again, Cottonwood is a perfect example of that, right?
Yeah.
The town of Cottonwood has been transformed by the wine industry, and in my opinion, in a good way, right? This creates jobs for people. One of the reasons I left Arizona when I did, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to find my career path, right? So we are creating career paths for people here. Here in Yavapai County, we currently have the only community college that supports a viticulture and enology program.
Right.
Cochise County just announced they're going to do the same thing, which is awesome.
Awesome.
But these are dedicated to building a workforce, right? So that we can create jobs and create industry for our young people especially.
And the industry has cachet. When you get to tell somebody you work in the wine industry, everybody thinks that's very impressive. And there's a lot of neat things. There's a lot of hard work related to it. But I think that's neat that we've got Yavapai's College here for viticulture. And I didn't know that. So Cochise County is announcing the same thing.
Yeah.
So critical and so important in our wine industry, especially as we're growing. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
Personal insights. Not only what have I not asked you, but when you look at the wine industry overall, what do you like to make sure that you share with somebody when you know you have an audience to talk to?
Yeah, well, I mean, just the fact that what the Arizona wine industry is creating for the people of Arizona, which I think is an economic engine, right? I think is really, really important to the people of Arizona. Something that is signature Arizona, right? It's not, you can't make Arizona wine anywhere other than Arizona, right? It's just no getting around that. So I hope people will take the time to support these local businesses, try these local wines. They're really good wines. I mean, I wouldn't say that if they weren't. I credit these educational institutions, not the University of Arizona necessarily, because we don't teach winemaking, but I'll give a lot of credit to Yavapai College for kind of standardizing the quality of winemaking that we have, and then those students go on and teach other people, and it sort of branches out. But I would remind people that the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension is a great resource for all sorts of farmers, and we go, as Joel mentioned, we do things beyond even agriculture and natural resources, although that's our bread and butter. But we're always available. We have offices in every single county in the state, and often multiple, and our job is to serve farmers in Arizona. So
I've been connected to Extension ever since 4-H, and I think every child, every youth that has ever been in 4-H has a connection to Extension. And then on top of that, now working for Arizona Farm Bureau for the last 18 years, felt really connected. In fact, I'm thinking that needs to be one of my next series, is that I just go from county extension office to county extension office, and Matt interview people like you. And on your point with the Yavapai College for Viticulture, my first winemaker interview was with Elon, or not Elon, we know Elon, but Emil Mullen of Cove Mesa, and he graduated from there, and that's what inspired him to do it. And then during the pandemic, he and his wife got more serious about, let's turn this into a business, and it's just taken off in the last 4 years for them. It's been amazing. So he's proof of the pudding that having that kind of a college here in Yavapai County is really critical. I have one last question, which I'm kind of adding to the list. For someone that is newly discovering, and we're hoping that the Talk to a Farmer, Talk to a Rancher program can maybe inspire that. For someone that's maybe their thing is craft beers, but they're hearing Matt tell them all the wonderful things about our wine industry, what would be some of your counsel, some of your tips that you would tell them to introduce themselves to some Arizona wine?
Well, I would go to your local grocery store and see what they carry. I would probably, which may be more limited, but you need to go to wine country probably. So you need to come to the Verde Valley, and check out the wineries that we have in Cottonwood and Cornville and throughout, and then maybe even make it down to Sonoyta and check out the wineries and tasting rooms they have there, and then finally make your way southeast over to Wilcox, because that's where you're going to have the greatest exposure to local wines, is where they're made.
And really, by going there, you're also going to end up at their tasting rooms. And when you end up at their tasting rooms, invariably, you can literally oftentimes talk to the winemaker, him or herself, and discover why they do what they do and what varietals that they grow. And it's just exciting. I mean, just being in Emil's tasting room last Friday, both Joel and I can attest to that. It was so fun because they could really speak to the wines they grow. They could talk about why it's so important. And I would encourage anybody, if they haven't discovered Arizona's wine country, that we really have. We've got these 3 regions now, the Verde Valley, Sonoyta, and also the Wilcox area. So it's amazing. And Matt, I just really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us and giving us kind of that 30,000-foot perspective as an extension specialist so that we could understand the wine industry that much more. And for those that follow us, just keep in mind that we're going to be doing this series for about 2 months. And we are going to, thanks to Matt and some of his insights and some of my other colleagues that know the other winemakers, we're going to be all over. We'll be, let's see, a lot in the Verde Valley. I haven't nailed down a Sonoyta Valley or area winemaker yet, but we've got several of them in the Wilcox area. So stick with us. You're going to learn a lot about Arizona wines, and have a blessed weekend.